Hey, what's up there, YouTubers? It's me again, Brian, aka Gamer55551, and I am back with a review video for this week. And for this one, I'm going to be taking a look at Rune Factory Guardian of Azuma, the latest entry in the Rune Fact series for the Nintendo Switch 2. This game is also available on the original Nintendo Switch and PC via Steam, and it's also going to be coming to the PS5 and the Xbox Series X and S as well. And if you're interested in any gameplay footage, I'll have a link down in the description down below, or you can click on the card that will appear up on this video, assuming you're watching this either on YouTube or Patreon. And for parents out there, it's worth pointing out that Rune Factory Guardian of Azuma is rated T for teens, ages 13 and up by the ESRB rating system. The Rune Factory series started out as basically more like a spin-off to the Harvest Moon series I remember reading about back in when it appeared on the Super Nintendo back in 1996. It was basically a sort of a different take to like a farming simulation and all. And since then, the series has sort of gained a following. It has been popular before, as we've seen other games have drawn some inspiration, like Stardew Valley is a good example though. And even Harvest Still from Square Enix, although that one got pretty forgotten very quickly and all. But Rune Factory started to turn into a little bit different, as it instead aimed for more of a fantasy setting, with part of it being farming and part of it being like dungeon crawling or RPG or adventure RPGs to a certain extent. And there have been different entries in the past though. Even some of it made its way onto the Nintendo 3DS, with Rune Factory 4 being one that I think a lot of people remember seeing on the Nintendo 3DS though. Rune Factory 5, I heard, got some very mixed response to some folks when that also made its way onto the Switch 1 and all. So it was sort of interesting to see how this one was going to do and all. Rune Factory Guardian of Azuma, which seemed to be, again, taking sort of a different take to the farming simulation with a little bit of, action or adventure RPG, to be exact though. But what I also found interesting was that this game was also be coming to the Nintendo Switch 2 as sort of a launch title for when the Switch 2 came out back in June and all. And I was very curious to see how this one was going to look, especially on the Switch 2 and all. And after spending some time with the game for a bit here and there, I honestly have to say Rune Factory Guardian of Azuma, I actually came away surprised with this game though. The fact that I started to enjoy this much more than I would have originally thought. I mean, yes, it is a AA type of a game, or a smaller game to be exact, so it's not going to have the huge mainstream appeal, but it still is a good game nevertheless. And I do think it's a good title to have as a launch title for, the Switch 2 and all. So I'm going to break this down into the pros and the cons, and we'll start off first with the pro. And one thing to point out with the Switch 2 version is that this game does run at 60 frames per second compared to the Switch 1, which is basically at, like 30 frames per second and all. So the fact that this game can even run at 60 frames per second is definitely good indeed, and definitely a nice addition for the Switch 2 version. Even when playing this game in portable mode, when I went out on a trip out to the desert a bit, I'm playing it on the Switch 2, it still was able to hit the 60 frames per second, so that certainly is definitely a good thing indeed, and I can see why people like the Switch 2 and all. Well, Switch 2 version, to be exact. The next thing I do want to talk about is the farming. Now, farming is not unusual into the Rune Factory series, and we've seen different versions of how the farming is done before. Most of the time, it's either, you grow the crops and everything, you basically, take out any of the weed or any of, chop up any wood in the area though. Sometimes you have to fill your bucket and then fill it again to water the plants and everything, plant the seeds and all. So it's nothing unusual that hasn't been seen in past Rune Factory games and all. But what I did like about this one is that it makes it a little bit easier, since you're supposedly this god or deity to a certain degree though. You don't have to run back and forth to, fill up your pitcher and then water the plants. You could do that right away. What even makes it more interesting is that you could do it from an overhead view and sort of plant each of the set up the soil, plant your your seeds and then water it and everything. You can even use that ground and area, since there are certain spots where you could grow your plants. You can also grow different trees and everything to setting up buildings, like a shop and everything like that. So you do have somewhat limited space, but there are times when there are certain areas that you can open up and sort of expand your farming areas on, to be exact. After the crops are grown and everything like that, you put them in the shed. You have to usually wait a day for them to wait a day because someone will pick them up, and then basically you'll earn your income, however, depending on what you put in the shed and everything. And you can use that to buy other stuff to grow your field and everything, to upgrading your gear and all. So you will be using a lot of that stuff. But I will say the farming part is certainly, I felt, is a bit easier than, say, some of the past Rune Factory games and all. And it'll be very curious to see how the developers incorporate any of that in a future Rune Factory game. One thing to point out with the Switch 2 version, although I've yet to try this, is that if you're doing the farming, you can also hold the Joy-Cons and put them in like mouse mode if you want to use that. From what I understand, it's only available to the farming side, so some may or may not like this. I personally prefer the controller with the grid, but it is a nice addition that they added to that, indeed, and all. And last but not least is the combat. And I will say the combat in Rune Factory Guardian of Azuma is enjoyable, though. It's simple in a way, but certainly definitely is good. Your character is armed with like different varieties of swords, depending on which one you want to use, to a bow and arrow and all. And you basically also have different spells when you collect certain items and everything. Some of that is required to basically deal with certain things, such as there are certain part of the land that needs to be brought back to life, to opening up certain gates that require you to shoot like at a certain dark flower and everything, excuse me, and everything like that. Plus, you can also bring other companions with you and all. So in terms of the combat, I did find it to be enjoyable. I do think it is fun and everything like that. And the 60 frames per second on the Switch 2 version does make the combat definitely more enjoyable than I would have thought in it and all. As far as the cons go, I will say in terms of the cons, is that definitely one part has to do with is the visuals. Now, I will say the visuals of the game aren't necessarily terrible or anything. It is going with sort of, an anime style and all, with basically, a look that's basically, like I think feudal Japan and everything. And I don't think it necessarily is bad, but when compared to other Switch 2 titles out there, whether it's something like what we've seen with Cyberpunk 2077, or say Donkey Kong, Bonanza, or basically like those kind of games, or even Metroid Prime 4 Beyond, yeah, it's not going to look anywhere near that level and all. Again, not terrible or anything, but anything special in terms of on the visual side though. But like I said, I don't hate the look to it. I think it looks fine. The anime looks to it is certainly good. It's just don't expect the visuals to wow you in any way. The next thing I do want to talk about is the combat. Now, as I mentioned in the pros, I thought the combat was enjoyable, and I still stand behind it, and I do think it is still enjoyable nevertheless. At the same time, I can understand how it might be a bit too easy for some folks out there. Even playing on normal difficulty, it might come off as being maybe too easy, especially when you're taking on certain enemies. While there may be some strong enemies where you probably don't want to confront them right away, I've had situations where I'm at, like, let's say, level 19, and I'm taking on a character that's at level 20, and I was able to defeat them easily and all. So the combat in the game is going to might come off as a bit too easy for some folks out there, though. And last but not least, and this one I think is kind of the biggest con, but this one might be annoying for some folks, is that the catch is for the Switch 2 version of Rune Factory Guardian of Azuma is the fact that the good news is that the full game is in the cartridge doll, which is certainly great and everything like that. But what makes this sort of an odd situation, if I'm not mistaken, is that it's basically the Switch 1 version, and this is mostly if you want to play this game on the Switch 1 and all. And in order to unlock the Switch 2 version, you have to go to the Nintendo eShop and pay $10 to unlock it. Now, I will say $10 isn't necessarily bad, though. I don't think it's the end of the world since it costs $10 to unlock. However, when compared to other developers out there that have offered a Nintendo Switch 2 version, though, they do kind of put this approach that they took with Rune Factory Guardians of Azuma to a shame, such as if you look at something like, say, High on Life 2, the developers offered a Nintendo Switch 2 version for free, or No Man's Sky, for those who have the Switch 1, they now have a Nintendo Switch 2 version that they offer, I believe, offer for free as well. So it is a little bit unfortunate that they are charging $10 to unlock, the Nintendo Switch 2 version. Again, $10 isn't bad, but it's not anywhere near the level as what we've seen other developers that have offered, let's say, a free upgrade to like the Nintendo Switch 2 version and all. Overall, I would say I came away pleased with Rune Factory Guardians of Azuma for the Nintendo Switch 2. While I understand it is more of a AA type of a game or a smaller title indeed, it is still, in my view, a good title nevertheless, and I also think it's probably one of the best entries in the Rune Factory games that I have played and all. At its best though, the Switch 2 version is running at 60 frames per second, which I think is certainly nice. I do like how they made the farming in this version of Rune Factory a bit easier this time around compared to past Rune Factory games. And I will say the combat is enjoyable, especially with the game, running at 60 frames per second and all. But at its worst though, like I said, I think the visuals are a mixed bag. Again, not great. Okay, but not great, to be exact though. The combat, while I do think it's enjoyable, might be a bit easy for some folks. And I do think it is a little annoying that they're charging $10 to unlock the Switch 2 version and all, compared to what other developers which are offering the Switch 2 version for free if you you purchase the Switch 1 version and everything. But in either case though, I still came away pleased with this game though. I definitely think it was a good launch title for the Nintendo Switch 2. I am hoping to see more entries into the Rune Factory series, and I am very curious to see how the developers are going to handle the next entry, especially considering the mostly positive response to how Guardian of Azuma was handled. It'll be interesting to see if they incorporate any of those elements into like a future Rune Factory game going forward and all. And of course, last but not least, I gotta give credit to Marvelous for putting this entire game into the Switch 2 cartridges though. I know there are some out there who are still iffy about the whole game keycard situation, which I will admit though, I'm not a huge fan of the game keycards, but I'm not losing sleep over it though. But nevertheless though, I do applaud the developers for actually putting the full Nintendo Switch 2 version in an actual Switch 2 cartridges though. So hats off to the developers for doing that and all. Okay, this concludes my review of Rune Factory Guardian of Azuma for the Nintendo Switch 2. And again, these are my opinion. What are yours? What are your thoughts about Rune Factory Guardian of Azuma? Have you picked this up for the Switch 2? Or have you picked this up for the PC? Or you're waiting to see how the PS5 or the Xbox Series X and S version would fare though? Are you glad to see the Switch 2 version run at 60 frames per second? Do you think the farming is a bit easier or the combat being enjoyable though? Are you annoyed with the fact that there's a $10 to unlock the Switch 2 version, or you don't think it's a huge deal and all, or you really don't view it as a huge deal in any shape or any form? Do you agree with what I said in this video? Do you disagree? Do you have a difference of opinion? As always, sound off in the comment section below. Let me know what you think, and if you like this video, I hope you hit the like button. I would appreciate it, and I hope you do subscribe to my YouTube channel. If you do, make sure you hit that bell icon for notifications of any new videos I put up. Also, feel free to share this video if you want to, and feel free to donate to my channel if you like. You can do it through PayPal Me, Patreon, or Steam Labs. Links will be in the description of this video, so you can watch this either on YouTube or Patreon. And I will see you again next time when I do another video. Hopefully that'll be soon. Until then, from Southern California, I wish you all a good day then. Bye!